Hi, everybody. It's Kelly Just here with the Philosophy Study. So we just had a little talk about the election, and now we're going to get into the 7 habits. So this is part 2 of habit 5, seek first to understand, then be understood. And so we are quite a chunk through this book. I was asked by 2 of our people that are here today to do this book with them. I did, and I put the videos online. So if maybe you missed a video or 2, you weren't here, guess what? They're all there. So today, we're on page 291. That's the beginning of the end, or the beginning of the middle. And I'm going to share my screen. And just as a quick FYI, because Ashik, you're new, so I record the sessions and then I post them on YouTube. So just be aware that your voice will be there. And if you pass the camera, let's just, again, this chapter is about empathy. Listen deeply to others, understand the impact of differences in perception. So when we have different perceptions, it's meaningful, right? Because we can have what he would say as a paradigm shift, and that allows us to increase our understanding of other people and reality, basically, right? Or even ourselves. And so this is going to increase our cooperation in interdependent situations, right? So if we're working as a team, or any real situation, because being interdependent would create more commitment to whatever it is we're doing. And then he gives the example of the young old woman picture in the Inside Out chapter, that we can look at the same image and get 2 different perspectives of it. And only through communicating about what that image is or what we see can we have a better understanding of each other's perspective. People thinking perceptions and paradigms are facts. So again, like, it is a fact that you may perceive something, but it's not necessarily a fact that what we perceive is reality, right? And so there's some checks that we can go through as like a reality check to test what is.
Example?
So
the paradigm are not facts.
So
Reality.
So the paradigm, if I'm making a judgment of somebody, like the fundamental attribution error, someone comes in and they're like yelling, and we're like, that guy's crazy, right? Because we look at the person and we judge their behavior based on, we impose a character trait. But really it was the situation that was making them upset. Like someone stole something from them, or they like smashed their laptop and their laptop doesn't work anymore.
Can you break down that bias? What would you say it was?
The fundamental attribution error.
Can you define that?
Is when we attribute a person's behavior to dispositional traits. So something about your character that's making you act that way, and overlooking situational factors.
Okay.
So due to a lack of understanding
Yes.
of the situation.
Yeah.
So in that way, you're saying what you just said, it depends on the context. It may not be the fact. I think you said it's just a judgment, right? Judgment may not be the reality. But what about, I say like Putin is a dictator. It's a judgment, right?
Sure.
But is it also a fact?
Well, you would have to just justify it. Why is he a dictator? Right? And if you can justify it, that he's taking away like the rights of his citizens, for example, they don't have a right to free speech.
But for other people, it's for you or for me, perhaps it's a dictator. For other people, it's a savior. It's a leader.
That's a good point.
People they need. So
That's
it's
a good point.
the perception.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's only one fact, reality. So,
Yes.
But people have different judgment about the same thing, right?
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the war. So the judgment is not the fact, right?
Yeah. And
or,
that's,
or not.
it's not. And that's what he's saying here, right? And thinking that your perceptions or your judgments are facts. It's a fact that you may have that judgment. Like it's a fact that I'm like holding a coffee cup, but it's not a fact that like the coffee cup is, I don't know, surreal or a transcendent object or something like that, The thing that matters is implementing our critical thinking strategies, is that you have to learn to justify or demonstrate what your facts are. Facts are bits of information that are unanimously given as true. Remember we said before, there's synthetic and analytic statements. So if it's a synthetic statement, there is a cup on the table, I would have to go in there and look to see. Whereas if I say the cup holds water, that's an analytic statement. The definition of cup is something that holds water. You don't need to look anywhere for it.
Well, let me give you an example. Even for after justification, people could still have a different. Like for example, now today is raining. Some people say I like the rain because, for example, some farmers, because maybe it hasn't rained for a long time, So the rain will really helps, his farming, right? But for people who want to go to downtown to work and have to drive, the heavy rain caused the traffic jam.
Mhm.
So he doesn't like the rain.
Mhm.
So both are justified. Both give reasons.
Sure.
Both just not just throwing some no grounded opinion, but which there's two different judgments. I like the rain. I don't like the rain. So which one is the
Yeah.
fact?
So the difference would be that there is a different evaluation criteria that is determining whether it falls under like or dislike. And in one context, it's that the rain is necessary for the crops. And the other context is that Lakeshore is flooded and people are getting stuck. Or in Spain, there's a flood and there's hundreds of cars all piled on each other, right? And so it depends on the criteria you're using for judgment. That's the thing that distinguishes why in one case it's a positive thing and why in the other case it's not.
So situational truth.
Yeah, well, yeah, different situations will meet that criteria of judgment differently, right? Like it depends. Like there could be too much rain where all your crops get washed out, and then that was too much rain, right?
I do have a question about the bias that you mentioned, the error, fundamental attribution error.
Mhm.
So you're saying that it's a fundamental attribution error if I see somebody behaving a certain way and I attribute that behavior to his or her character as opposed to situational factors, right?
Yeah.
But isn't that a little bit, it's not entirely true, because we could have 10 people all reacting in different ways based on one situation.
Mhm.
And so isn't it the opposite of that? Which it is truly internal. It's based on their character, because 10 people can all have the same experience. Like we're all sitting in this room and we all have some different experience of whatever is happening right now.
Mhm.
And so we can't say it's because of this room or it's because of the temperature. It's really because of what's going on in our minds and how we're perceiving things, isn't it?
Yes, but the situation might not just be the only present context. Like it could be that like somebody was fired from their job or got broken up or they got hit by a car and then they came into the room. So we have to have a broad scope to observe this person, to understand the context of their behavior, and also within the situation itself and that's where being empathetic, like at least give them the opportunity to say, well, what happened here? Like, what's going on?
Right. So instead of this person is this thing, it's they're acting like XYZ as
Sure.
opposed to, okay, got it.
You can say you're acting like this.
Right. Not saying you are this.
Yeah.
Got it.
Like focus on the behavior.
Yeah.
And not labeling or generalizing the person
Yeah.
fundamentally.
Yeah.
And even if someone suffers from a mental illness, right, like they're schizophrenic, then that's not like their fault. It's just that they're having an episode, and you can still be compassionate. That's the best thing, but also have boundaries for safety, making sure that there's, someone's tweaking out on crack. You're not going to be like, hey, do you want to just like stay at my place tonight? Like, that's totally cool with me. Like, okay. Transcend limits of individual perception. So again, as a human being, you have your own view, right? You're an independent, autonomous agent. And what that means is that your perspective is limited. There's only so much scope that you can observe and process, right? And so communicating with others will enrich your perspective. And sometimes that might be accepting that your view was lacking in detail or richness. And so incorporating other views, assuming that they're accurate, is only going to be good for you. So he gives this example of the national banking contract. And so this team asked the other team to write the contract how they wanted it. They just gave them the opportunity to express what they wanted out of the deal. And then when their team read it, they were able to understand their perspective clearly, and then they could do some specific modifications. And then once he understood their perspective and explained it on his own and from what they were thinking, they listened to them. Once he understood their perspective, he explained his perspective and they listened, because he started off by being empathetic. They reciprocated with empathy to him, right? So let's look at the text here.
I have a question about that, what you just said, which is that, so in this situation, a person wants to make a deal, they want to agree. So people, they want to come to a consensus.
Yes.
Right. So that works with empathy. It works. We know it works.
Sure.
Because we both want the best deal possible. We're trying to make an agreement. What if you're speaking to a person, and we were talking about this outside before we came in, who there's no context that we want to come to a mutual agreement, mutual understanding. It just, I have all my perspectives, opinions, they have all their perspectives, opinions, and there's no context in which we can come together, like in the context of a deal, for example.
Mhm.
How does that gap get bridged? Because I have issues with that sometimes. It's
You
like,
can't
what are we even
control-
talking about?
You can't control the other person. You first do understand them
Yeah.
and understand what their interests are. And if they just don't have the capacity to care or to be empathetic to you, you have to just work within their framework
Uh-huh.
and just be like, you know what, this deal's not in your interest. You know, it's not going to work out for you. And you just speak from within their framework. Don't try to get them to if it's a narcissist or a psychopath, like the psychopath just doesn't not give a shit about your interest. They're just trying to use you as a means to an end.
But what if there is no deal? That's what I'm saying. And we're just having a conversation. Me and you randomly.
Oh,
on a,
well, the quality of all of your interactions will increase if you understand other people.
Yeah.
That's just the point, right? And it's a test to see how you can take your content and make it meaningful to them. And that's the same thing when he talks about an emotional deposit in the bank account, right? He says, how do I know what a deposit is unless I understand what you value?
We talk about the reality. It's our reality. One real example, Matrix, the movie. How do you know that all this is real?
Yeah, well, I think we have like some degree of instinct for reality. You know, like we have evolved to approximate reality.
Oh, Plato, the cave of Plato.
right.
Absolutely.
Like
They have one
simulation.
reality here and the other reality. They to try to explain you the reality. So this is the question: is the perception of reality.
I think it's not only just reality, though. I think it's values. So, like what is real, you could also say what is important.
Mhm.
Another way to talk about importance is to talk about value. So in Plato's cave, the figures on the cave wall
Uh,
were of value to the prisoners. But the problem inherent in this is that they're not real. They're just representations of something that they ascribe meaning to. So is it really important? Right? And to say no would to have something else that is valuable. And that when the person is out of the cave, they're like, this is way, way better than being stuck in that fucking cave I was in before. Right. And so if you don't have an alternative thing to contrast it to, it can be difficult, especially for concrete thinkers, people that need physical things. They can't like visualize or imagine an idealized context and motivate themselves with that. So they would need to experience it.
I believe that's
Right.
why exploring is important.
Sure.
You know, I remember someone said you're only as big as to where you've been.
All right. Okay, we're going to the book.
I have a similar question.
Yeah.
You talk about transcend the limits of individual perceptions.
Sure.
I think you talk about, but what about like the Ukrainian and Russian? You know, for example, they're in a war.
Sure.
So how do they transcend? You know, each side will have their own perception about the war or what is justice, whatever. You know, how do these two group of people transcend their limits?
Well, I think you need to look at like overarching interests, and again, people can lie. If you're just assuming that everything that's being said and communicated is honest and truthful, that like it's not representative of reality, right? Putin lies, he manipulates. It's not just like a fair exchange here. And so, if you took a large segment of the Russian population that were not necessarily pro-Putin and they could speak freely, you could say, what's important? What is life about? And you can establish a set of values that transcends any sovereign nation. And then you can put sovereignty down. You can say, well, we can both achieve these values as neighbors, for example, and you don't have to invade our land, kill our people, destroy our culture, et cetera, and we can trade together and we can grow and be prosperous as two independent communities that are just living beside each other.
I like that. It just in the human history, I never saw even a single example. I couldn't recall a single example like this. Leaders are talking in this way. You know, like they just hammer you.
That's
They
true.
just colonize you. They just
Well, yeah, but and then that's just again, let's just go back to why we're here. That's why the Philosophy Society is the thing.
And you talk invite, but you know what's the first capital on the Russian people? Kiev. So who they feel somehow a feeling of possession. Because before it was our country and people. It's our capital. Later was Moscow. But for us, it was invasion for sure. And for Russia, This is a country, territory. This territory belongs to Russia.
That's their perception. That's what he's saying. It's like, that's why
Are
you
you
can't
from
come
Russia?
to that agreement.
No.
Where are you from?
He's from
I want to
Spain.
Spain. I'm from Spain. No.
Sorry?
No, but I think I was what's happened about Russia.
Yeah.
I read history.
But you talk about that's why philosophy society.
Yeah.
Is, but I think I probably asked you before, but I want to. But you know, you're gonna influence like the world leader. You're gonna influence Trump. You're gonna influence Putin, because they are kind of deciding, you know, what's going on now in the world.
Yeah,
And what kind of philosophy society do?
yeah.
What
He's talking about it's like a seed that grows into something. Like it starts somewhere.
But maybe the forest got destroyed before the seed can even have a chance to.
True.
That's so pessimistic, bro.
Actually, behind that is like a citizen. Like you are a citizen, I'm a citizen, we're all citizens. You know, how can we influence the world?
So
the
it
big
begins with
picture?
value. Values are important, and values are established through a process of socialization. Evolutionarily, the human condition is going to create certain necessary values, like drinking water, right? Access to clean water. And then we develop human rights and our social contract based on at least those fundamental properties of the human condition. So the first thing is to understand what values are the best, and that applies to all people, not just the person in a position of power. And the Philosophy Society's role is to give people the tools to understand and communicate what those values are to themselves and with each other. And those tools, when the population has them, Trump and Putin just won't matter anymore.
Is that how we build a clean water for the human being? I don't think so.
I think so.
I think the clean water is just some governor or whatever.
Well, you
just
can
in
read
ancient
the
Rome.
Theactetus.
Mhm.
You know, we need to make a world of philosopher kings. Every person needs to be their own philosopher king. And when you do that, then things will be better. And some people don't have the capacity for it, and that's fine. Then we just take care of them. Like if someone's suffering from an addiction or a serious mental health issue, you don't expect them to run a country. You just want them to not hurt themselves or other people. And that's fine. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with there being a differentiation in cognitive capacity, because at least those that have the ability to think for themselves, then the Philosophy Society is there for you to support that, and then you can take those skills and bring it to the next place.
But if folks, I have the capacities, but the fear. Don't touch me. I am happy with my life, with the people. So I have the capacity. I know it's wrong. I know it's a dictatorship. But if I talk, perhaps they kill me. So,
Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
begin with thinking. You know, like I feel that we're at a position now with technology where the internet is relatively accessible, right? And when you start to learn these skills, you don't even have to question the government. You know, you can save that. Like that can happen later because it's dangerous. But at least let's deal with our interpersonal relationships and mental illness. And let's just start with these things first. And things will start to slowly change, because these properties of like being empathetic, accepting feedback, trying to use your mind to be real about the information it's representing, right?
But accessible for you. Ask Chinese people in China about internet.
Again, what we're talking about at this point is how do you make the paradigm of the Philosophy Society international and deal with international issues, like all of these things that are going on at that level. And I understand that there are some barriers. First, let's just deal with this area. And once the people here have been this is like super, like very idealized discussion, but it's fine. Once the people here have figured it out, then you can provide services to other countries, like a free educational program where they'll learn those things, right? And if not, you can provide there's different ways. Like countries provide asylum if people are going to be, if their lives are going to be threatened, you know. And I feel that slowly, as the current democratic societies pick up on this, people within fascist governments it just makes sense to learn this stuff, because it's naturally the response towards mental illness anyways. And then the macro response, when people learn critical thinking and psychological awareness, for example, and social awareness, then they necessarily will just have more of a democratic state. Just like I said in the response inside the chat, I said the fundamental difference between fascism and democracy is respect for an individualized autonomy for everybody,
Sure.
right? That you're your own person and we respect you. Same with David, same with Ticia, everybody, right?
Mhm.
And then together we take that autonomy and that agency and we make decisions as a group. The problem is that people are not necessarily autonomous because they lack the knowledge or the competency to accurately understand what's going on. In a fascist government, they don't have the freedom. So we'll say you at least have the freedom, but you may not have the education or the training. And so that's where the philosophy society comes in.
So
Right.
I have a couple of questions. So you mentioned, so it, like the theme of what you're saying is based in cognition. So I see that you're saying people think for themselves, people's capacity to think. But the one glaring issue that I think Jose brought up is that people's emotions were driven by fear and tribalism. Like these things, they don't go away. And I know you shrugged it off, but it's a real thing.
No, we can talk about that. That's
like,
fine.
Like that, it's really, really hard to just use your brain power to control all of your emotions, control your emotions.
No, I
Like
don't.
that, like that's, how does that even work?
Yeah, I don't mean that. Like, so when we, like, for example, in anger management, right? Like people have anger problems, and like just as an example, right?
Yeah.
And they lose control of their emotions. You could have like fear as a different emotion, you know, and you're paranoid and you have a phobia, for example. Psychologically, there's different ways that we can not create situations that are going to make you in fear or not make you angry in the first place, right? Because once your brain is engaged in anger, the chemical structure of your brain is different now. And like, even if you're done being angry, I don't know if you've experienced this, but you'll have like a lag after, you know, like a post-anger effect because you've exhausted all this mental energy and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And so, you know, there's different strategies that we can implement, which I would say to increase our emotional intelligence is to be aware of what's making you upset. How can you change the environment as to not evoke that feeling again, like thirst or starvation? You know, I need to be proactive about this. I can't be like, I've been starving for 3 days. How do I solve this? No, I need to, like 3 days before I didn't have food, know how to gather food. And humans have an instinct for that, right? Foraging and stuff like this. With those that have cognitive capacity, but are depreciated because of emotional states, right? We just, and that happens in our society here too. You know that when you're getting stressed out, and some people know some things I've been dealing with recently that have stressed me out. You know, you have to part of it is recognizing your limitations, you know, and then taking it one step at a time. And this is almost the strategy to get out of mental illness. Like, how do you deal with depression, for example, right? It's when your lowest moments, you make proactive decisions, i.e. deciding how I will respond that is in your self-interest and will make you a healthier person, right? That's where like the role of exercise and eating healthy when you feel like crap makes a tremendous difference. Taking actions to do things that were going to increase your well-being or increase your autonomy, right? Like for example, I'm a Canadian citizen. I was born in Canada, but my dad was born in the States. So I have the opportunity to get my American citizenship, right? Doesn't really matter, like, because I'm doing anything right now, but doing that is actually better for me. So I had to apply for a new birth certificate that has the location of where my parents were born. And that's one of the first documents you need, right? And it says my father was born in the United States. And so that is me taking action on something that I have really zero emotional valence towards. But cognitively, I know that will increase my opportunities, for example, right? Like that's the reason why you go to school and get an education, right? Or get experience in a specific field, you know, and then you have opportunities that way. And so no matter how I feel, if I felt bad or if I felt neutral, I still want to take either situation and make decisions that are beneficial for my long-term growth. And once you get into a pattern of that, I'm going to put the hypothesis out there, that's how you recover from things like depression, right? That's how you make decisions that are important for yourself, independent of the distorted thinking stuff. That you have to do that too. So I would say it's very similar, right? And that's why that these things that are, if you're in a state like Viktor Frankl or whatever, things like that kind of situation, you're in a place where it's very bad. Fundamentally, my philosophy is based on consciousness as the common denominator for our experience. You can't really save an experience if you weren't really conscious of it, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm aware of my dreams, I could say I experienced it. But if I'm not aware of it, I don't even know if I dreamed. It's like, I don't know, something happened, you know?
What is so amazing is your feeling sometimes depends on your brain. For example, you have a car accident and this is damage on your left, on your right side. You are totally different. You feel
Yeah.
in another side. So how is possible? It's my feelings is controlled by
Mm.
my brain. Many experiences.
There's a famous example for that.
Phoenix Gage.
Okay.
Well, your feelings, well, because well, I think that just shows why there's things like a soul doesn't exist, right? Because people with brain damage are completely different people,
One conclusion.
right? Their morality is completely shifted, and so it completely debunks the soul theory. Um,
And what about sociopaths, like 2%? Because we know any organism, you put the bad apple,
mhm.
metaphorically and literally, into a bunch of good apples,
Sure.
it makes all the other apples bad around it. The good apples don't make the bad apple good, right? Same with
Yeah, yeah.
people, right? You put a bad person in a team of winners. They've done this in corporate studies, and it drags the whole team down. They think that the people are going to pull the other person up, but that's not what happens.
Mhm.
So what
One
do we
second.
do with? I don't want to say what do we do with those people, but how could like those types of people be trained? Because sociopaths, they don't have any empathy. They
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
feel emotions.
Yeah.
So they can literally go into a group of 100 people and destroy the whole fucking group.
Only if the group is unaware. One sec, I'm going to respond. Let's
Yeah.
let Dodgy go. Dodgy, you go first.
Thank you, Achilles.
Yep.
My question was on the soul. You commented. Can you repeat that again? You said the soul is disproved by.
If you believe the soul is an unchanging property of who you are, that even after death, this unified essence of you lives on, that would mean at least during your entire life, it's unchanging. If it's unchanging when the body dies, then for sure, when the body's alive, it would be constant. But that's not the case. What we see
For
with
example, if the soul, if it doesn't exist, that would mean our sense of soulness, like our sense of existence, like the feeling of existence, does it arise from the physical properties of the body?
the feeling of existence, I'm not using that as a criteria for the soul. I'm more saying like it's a distinct immaterial entity that's tied to your material body in some ways. And it is the thing that lives on after you die, that in some ways is representative of your moral conduct.
Yeah, but in a way, it's like
Soul-
it's your personhood, right? Because you said, as an example, like when people have mental illness or like devastating mental illness, they tend to be like completely different people. So that's kind of disproves it because it's tied to their mental state, to their physical state of their brain.
Yeah, well, that's like exactly. And Phoenix Gage was this railroad worker like 100 years ago, and the dynamite went off early, and a big piece of the railroad went right through his eye and like took a chunk of his head out. So his frontal cortex was damaged, but he survived, and it healed over. But he was completely a different person. He didn't have self-control. He would swear and shit, and would like be aggressive and stuff. So it wasn't the same person. And
Here's my question, though. I understand. I actually heard about that example. It's a very interesting case you mentioned. If somebody, like let's say a super genius scientist from the future comes over, and then he copies me, my physical body, all the chemical processes that go on, be within it, 100% with no differences, almost, or maybe even 99.999%, like as close as he can to me, with all the chemical properties, everything in place. But even if he created that entity, from my perspective, I would be looking at another entity that looks exactly like me, maybe behaves like me, but I still have perspective. Because just because he copied my physical properties does not mean I would be looking through my eyes and his eyes at the same time. There's something in me that even if every single thing, the physical properties are exactly the same, even if that is created, I'll be able to observe it from an outside perspective because I'm not truly that thing that's an exact copy of me. I'm something that's observing something that's an exact copy of my physical self.
Sure. Okay.
Does that make sense? Or like, what do you make of that in your...
Well, there's like movies about this, like The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where they're like when you die, they copy you just before you're dead. And they have like a brain scan, they just recreate you. It's a cloning question. And it's the philosophy of identity. Yeah, like, are you the same person? And I would say no. You're not the same person, but you're very similar, right? But yeah, okay, let's continue because we're off track and I want to kind
Before I do that, I just want to
of. You guys are bad. Yeah.
Sorry, this is about the soul.
All right.
I don't believe the soul is what expresses itself.
Yeah.
You're saying like soul, like if you have brain damage, you're a completely different person. I believe our consciousness tries to interpret the
Mhm.
soul through thoughts,
Mhm.
but the soul itself, I believe, is thoughtless, formless. It's just like,
Yeah.
just exists. It just is. It's just energy.
Yeah.
Sure.
So our brain tries to comprehend that through thoughts, thought processes, or actions and whatnot.
Yeah.
For me personally, I believe it's like the life force.
That's the perspective I take as well.
You guys, there's conversations to be had. I knew that when you first came. Yeah, well, it's just then how do you even know it exists? You know, I know faith is the answer here,
Oh,
but how would you even have an experience of the soul then? And then Kant would bring up the noumena, and then it's something you can never experience. So if that's the case, you can only be agnostic to it. You don't know if it exists or not.
The only close thing I can think of is like how when like in contraception, when the sperm infiltrates the egg, there's like a flash of light.
Is there though?
They recreate it in a lab, yeah.
Okay.
Whoa, that's
I'm not
cool.
sure if that's,
so cool.
I don't know if that's a
We-
thing.
we can, it is, yeah. They,
But even if there's a flash of light, it doesn't mean that it's
I'm not
a
saying it
soul.
is. No, but I'm just saying like it's a weird phenomenon that happens.
Okay.
Like
I don't know about that, but that's interesting.
Because you're creating new life, right?
basically, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm still skeptical, but
By
it's
all
fine.
means, no, I'm not here to convince you. But
That's okay.
It's a cool video. I was
I
thinking,
promise that this is my
Yes.
last question.
Would you like to say?
So what you describe here, every time I hear it, it's wonderful. It's within this room, it's so beautiful. When I go outside the society, you know, it's a little bit different. You know,
Okay.
I'm just playing the devil's advocate.
That's
okay?
fine.
Okay. So one of the challenge, you know, you talk basically when you talk about autonomy, you know, consciousness, cognitive, you know, the individual has a capacity to get out the emotion, you know, despite the whatever. So this is to me, it's like a very traditional, like a liberalism, you know, you know, ever since, you know, Greek, whatever. But, you know, today's politics, actually, it's become very complicated. It's an organizational structure. It's a very tech, you know, there's many layers, you know. What I'm saying, you know, is that we see today's, you know, politics organization or how do they govern, it's become something that, like a science that the normal citizen, you know, like they don't even know where is it, like a machine, you know, you don't know how to go, you know. I heard from somebody who worked actually for the government, you know, how do they function? How do they think? You know, the logic. It's not like there's some theory, like some liberal theory, you know, oh, everyone has the rights, you know. It becomes very technical. It's become what Foucault said, something like, you know, the postmodern, they talk about that, you know.
Okay.
So this very traditional, you know, very mainstream Western liberalism, whatever, you know, sounds very good, you know, everyone can cultivate, we just plant a seed, you know. But if every day you're facing like this bureaucracy with so many layers, complicated with how I feel helpless, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think that like there's obviously part of it is supposed to be a self-correcting system, right? And so the system is an emergent phenomena of its members and the policies those members are following, right? That's kind of a bureaucracy. And so I think that there's different kinds of bureaucratic systems, and having a bureaucratic system that's based on like merit, that doesn't really have appeal to authority as its primary mode of functioning, that's important because then we're utilizing critical thinking within the system itself for the ends that the system is supposed to get towards, right? But those members need to have it. Like you can just look at specific things like workplace bullying or, you know, like discrimination and stuff like that. And if we understand our own nature and how our minds function, then we can be aware of it and incorporate that awareness into our dealings with others. So an example is like groupthink, right? Or the CEO disease I gave earlier. And so having a social context that is open to feedback and criticism and integrating information from all levels of the system based on that, not the individual, but the merit of what is said. Is it relevant? That will change the way the system is functioning. So some systems may not be functioning well, but you're better off with some self-defense than none. So even if everybody else is not doing it, you wearing an oxygen mask is still good, right? It would be best if everyone had one if they're going under, but if only you have one, that's okay. That's still a good thing. right?
It
So
sounds
do it.
very, I mean, I like it, I like it. It sounds, even though it sounds very idealistic.
Well, but you need to have a goal, and
You need to have
and
a goal.
like it's
No matter how-
if you're not idealistic, then there is no goal. So it's like whatever. Is it a realistic ideal? And I think that it conceptually makes sense. It's just the implementation part. And so we're here. Like, are there more people here today than last time? Yes.
But do you believe in
There
Big Bang Theory?
Hmm?
Do you believe in Big Bang Theory?
Oh, you mean how
What's
the
that
world
small-
starts? How the world starts?
Just explodes and creates a universe.
Oh, that's a good analogy. I like that. You see what he's getting at, right?
No,
It starts from that little tiny point.
no, it's so.
And to the point about ideals, if you look at goal theory as well, if you have a more ambitious goal, it's more likely that you're going to achieve that goal as opposed to setting goals that are too easy for you to achieve, because you trivialize it and you don't have a vision. And so we have the capacity to create something in the future and then figure out what all the steps we need to do to take to actually work towards that. It's worth going to. What else are you going to do with your life? And it's the best thing you could possibly do. Come up with the perfect ideal and then go after it.
Like, let's start with Toronto, right? Like, let's start with making a community here, and then have a measurable method to test the members and how they've been growing and developing, right? And then we'll go from there. Like, I came to Toronto from Thunder Bay, and I did this for 5 years in Thunder Bay. And it was different there because there's nothing to do. There's the bush, and there's like a Tim Hortons. All right. We can go to the bush. It's nice there, but
Where's Thunder Bay?
it's 15 hours north of here.
Like, is it in Ontario?
Yeah.
Okay.
But do you have that the feeling of
I
something
thought it
that
was
you
probably
accom-
Saskatchewan or something.
you have some feeling of accomplishment, like you spend 5 years, you do this. But
Yeah, well, it's a practice, right? Like if you were going to create, like, look at it this way: if you're going to create a whole new sports game, right? First, you have to plan it out. You're like, well, what the hell is the game? And so I'm still figuring parts of that out. And I've thought about doing some different things while we're here and getting you guys to like play a philosophy game.
Yeah.
And it will come, but I haven't
It's great.
fully conceptualized it yet. And then there's like getting people to play the game. They have to follow the rules of the game. There needs to be different teams. Like, it's a crazy, that's a lot, right? But it's not that it can't be done. It's just how can it be done?
Yeah.
And like, I have a lot of stuff that I've done. Like, if you look at my website, like, there's more than you can, if you read everything on there, no, there's no way.
Can I say one thing about that too?
Yeah.
Just think about all the historical people of the past, right? I'm going to name the Greek ones because
Because Dimitri's here, you might as well.
I'm also Greek, right? But just look at the individual names: Plato, Aristotle. Just name Kant, whoever, right? Just one guy. Now, of course, they impacted many people, but the point is, like, as far back as 2,400 years ago or whatever, right? One guy, two guys, right? Or whoever, right? The revolution, Rosa Parks, right? What happened with that whole movement? It's one person that starts something that can create a cascading effect. And so if you say, well, what's the point? Then nobody does anything. And
Yeah.
everything kind of
Yeah,
not just stays the same, but it degrades over time. So
that's true.
there's
I
got to
also
be.
feel like, oh, can I add? I feel like most of them died without seeing any of their achievements in their lifetime.
Exactly.
It's, yeah, but then they still did it though,
Yeah.
right? It was an intrinsic motivation. They did it for the sake of doing it versus for some reward. And
Nietzsche
that's-
died horribly too.
Sorry?
Nietzsche died horribly too, even though like
Yeah. Wear a condom. Don't
Oh, syphilis?
Yeah.
Oh man.
don't have sex with prostitutes.
Yeah.
Frederick Nietzsche.
Okay.
All of man's
so,
problems is caused by his inability to sit alone in a room by himself. That's what he
is
said.
that he said?
I
Yeah.
would say I saw
All of man's
few
problems is created by his
optimistic people
inability
here.
to sit in a room quietly by himself.
That's Nietzsche. That's cool. Do
Yeah.
you know where he wrote that?
Yeah.
Which book?
I don't know which book. But
That's okay,
he
that's
wrote
cool.
that. So basically, he's saying that, like, like we get into trouble, right? With anything, like we get into fights and it's all happening because we're going out in the world. So maybe if you just sit in a room by yourself
Mhm.
with your thoughts, you wouldn't get into any trouble.
Learn to meditate a little bit.
Yeah.
There you go.
Something like that.
I just say, I mean, it sounds good, but sometimes you see, wow, as an individual, this thing, I couldn't do anything about it, think about the Ukrainian, they just get invaded by Putin, Putin just made our mind, and then all the millions of people can suffer, you know, how can they make a change? You know, maybe they couldn't even see any expression. They, you know, every day people die, you know, starving, you know. I
It's
don't
like,
know.
you know, so it's like,
This is helpless
Yeah, yeah.
feeling, you know, how do you conquer that?
so think of it this way. This is a good analogy. So when they used to have these like trampoline net thingies that when someone was going to jump out of a building or there's a fire, they would just catch them, right?
Right. I've seen that in movies. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So say you're just one person and someone's like 6 stories up, and and you're like, what am I going to do? And say that all of us are standing there. We each think that. You're like, what am I going to do? Right? I can't do anything. So the bystander effect, right? But if we all get together and we all do a little bit of effort, that combined effort has a tremendous output and effect that no single person can do, even though they can do that. But I'm looking at it being a domino effect, right? And so what I want from you guys is for you guys to learn from me, and then you facilitate your own philosophy. So if Natalia leaves us, she is a butterfly going to new places, new meadows. She could take the things that she's learned here and then facilitate her own philosophy society, right? And so the goal is to not like, you can use these words. I'm not saying the words, but if that's how you understand it, that's fine. And that way, you bring it with you, and then you create it over there. I've told Leticia the same thing. She goes back to France, right?
I'm from Bangladesh. I'm outside of that. I don't live here.
Okay.
I'm just here for.
You were all his disciples.
So when I go back to Bangladesh, I'm going to start philosophy society over there.
Yeah. And so if people go away and they're still being affiliated with the philosophy society that I'm doing, right? Then there's specific like things we have to do from an organizational standpoint, and like a branding standpoint, so that there's quality control, right? But they're fundamental principles that you come to train and to practice. And the organizational mandate has a lot of content there. You can take most of that. That's like what the book will be. And you would just be able to take the book and then you'd be able to run this just like me, right? We're not 100% there. If you read everything on the website, you could probably figure it out and watch the videos. So I don't know. If I died today, then there's enough. Whether the motivation's there, we'll see.
Are you a dreamer, like the way of life? Are you a dreamer?
I think so. I'm a thinker.
Aren't you, man? Aren't you a dreamer? Don't you have visions? Don't you have ideas? Don't you work towards things?
But,
I don't mean to be combative, but like, don't you think about the future and what you can do?
That's a quote.
I once called myself the Nightmare Killer because I'm like like a progressive rock vocalist. And there was this one time where like when you brought up the sociopaths or the psychopaths, like they're actually just walking around, looking at who they want to eat.
Right.
You know, like they would do it, but they're not allowed to, and they would get caught. You know, but sometimes they're looking at you and they're just thinking, oh yeah, you know.
Why in this society psychopaths are really successful people, CEOs in the top position?
Because they don't feel bad about lying or using you.
They
and
don't
so-
care about others. It's people who say, okay,
Yeah, they're objects, they're tools
No, I
to manipulate. Yeah.
I can manipulate. Yeah. Also, I the right person to kill the other people.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. So the Nightmare Killer was just that like I had this thought, and then this guy was staring at me like he was the psychopath, and he knew that I knew he existed. I was on like Queen and Young. It was a thing, and it was just like
It was a real
thing.
guy.
It was a guy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
Okay.
just like the way he dressed, he was like wearing red and stuff like that. But just like he had this moment with me, you know.
Right.
And I was like, if I ever see you doing crazy shit, brother, I'll fucking take you down, you know. It was like one of
Did you
those
ever see him
moments.
again?
No, but like I've had psychopaths come into my contact with me because they again don't see people as people; they're just objects.
Yeah.
And this one guy at this one party I was at, I was like, "You're a psychopath." He's like, "I know." I was like,
That's
"Well, you need." I was like, and then I did this whole thing with him, and he was just like, he just couldn't believe that I was able to see it.
Can you gotta describe that? You gotta talk about that right now. What happened? Come on, man.
I was dancing
Uh-huh.
like the dance champion,
Yeah, push them.
different guy.
That's different.
Different guy. And he was just like bumping into everybody, like just not aware. He had 2 girls with him. He was selling cocaine and shit. And then I just have a presence. Like I'm in the center of the dance floor and he kept on bumping into me. And I was like, I'm not going to allow, like when you're on the dance floor, you don't let other men push you around.
Right.
Someone asks you, you can be a gentleman and allow and give them some space, but men will test you by pushing you physically.
Mhm.
And so part of it is you need to like saddle the ground. Like you need to literally like have a wide stance and grab the earth. you know? And then it's a little bit more difficult for some guy to be an asshole, right? And so this dude just kept on bumping into me. And then at one point he was really close and I just turned him. I was like, I know. And he's like, what? I was like, you're a psychopath. He's like, and then he's just like, how did you know?
Wow.
And I'm like, this is what I do.
Wow.
And it was just, and if I can scare the psychopath, that's actually not that's the nightmare killer. Then they don't feel fear in the same way, you know. It's more, but it's like the wolf in the sheep's clothing. If you rip off the sheep's clothing, then they're exposed for whatever they are, and they don't mean to be bad necessarily. They're just like, I was born this way, and it's like, okay, well, we still need to figure shit out. Don't be eating my eyes and stuff like that. I'm, you know, characterizing the situation, make it funny, but and then the guy, the girls he was with, the one girl came up to me. She's like, I love you. Because they were a little scared of them.
Right.
And because sometimes physically just standing there is enough.
Yeah.
Just
Nobody's
saying,
ever said that to him, guaranteed.
it's not the first time this has happened.
Right. Okay.
I've met several people. And so
What
these
is
are
it
like,
about them? That's my question. Like, is it a look in their eyes? Is it that energy? Is it you feel something in your
it
gut?
was, he was just dancing and just bumping into people to the point where like this one dude was like in his face because he kept on bumping into his girlfriend and then like flirting with her and shit.
Right.
And I was like, you just don't see people, man. I know you might be high, but we're just objects,
Got it.
you know? And I was like, it's dangerous for you.
Right.
I was like, you're gonna get your ass kicked, man, because you can't fucking see. They're just rocks. I was like, that's not good, bro.
Right,
like this guy over here is gonna kick your fucking ass.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so he became like my friend, and I was like, you know, like, you can't.
For an hour, and then you're like, yeah.
No, I was like, I've seen him a couple more times, and he's always like, you know, this guy I don't really know, you know. And I was like, whatever, man.
Are psychopaths bad? I mean, they don't intend to be bad, but are they bad?
They're not
Is it
bad.
a property of them?
No, they're not bad. It's just that remorse is challenging for them, and they don't really see people as persons in the same way. And this could be because of their cognitive deficiency, right? There's something about their brain that's lacking. Like the amygdala is smaller in psychopaths, so that's some indication of this. But anyways, I'm taking this. We're steering. We're going back. Okay. Okay. So 291. We're actually talking about the 7 habits of highly effective people, and we're on chapter habit 5. Okay. So I'm going to read from the text here. We're at 291. As you learn to listen deeply to other people, you will discover tremendous differences in perception. You'll also begin to appreciate the impact that these differences can have as people try to work together in interdependent situations. You may see the young woman, I see the old lady, and both of us can be right. Look at the world through, so for example, you can look at the world through your spouse's perspective. It can be a money-centered perspective, so we have the centeredness that we talked about before and begin with the end in mind. You may be scripted in the abundance mentality or the scarcity one. You may approach problems from a visual, intuitive, holistic right brain paradigm, or be very left brain, sequential, analytical, and verbal. Our perceptions can be vastly different. We both have lived with our paradigms for years, thinking they are facts and questioning the character or mental competence of anyone who can't see the facts. With all our differences, we're trying to work together. We're trying to manage resources and accomplish results. So how do we do it? How do we transcend the limits of our individual perceptions so that we can, 292, deeply communicate, we can cooperatively deal with the issues to come up with a win-win solution? The answer is habit 5. The first step in the process of win-win, even if the other person is not coming from that paradigm, is seek first to understand, which responds to your point earlier. So this example of an executive with his experience working with a small company, the process of negotiating a contract with a large national bank institution. They flew in lawyers, a negotiator. They had an 8-person team. They wanted to go for a win-win or no deal. They wanted to significantly increase the level of service and the cost. They were overwhelmed with demands from this large financial institution. So the president of a company sat across the negotiating table and told them, "We'd like for you to write down the contract the way you want it so we can make sure we understand your needs and concerns. We will respond to those needs and concerns. We can talk about, and then we can talk about pricing." The members of the negotiating team were overwhelmed, astonished they were going to have the opportunity to write the contract. It took 3 days and they wrote the deal. When they presented it, "Now let's make sure we understand what you want," the president said. He went down the contract, rephrasing the content, reflecting the feeling until he was sure that he was that they understood him. They understood each other. When they thoroughly understood their perspective, he proceeded to explain some concerns from his perspective, and then they listened to him. They were ready to listen. They weren't fighting for psychological air because he allowed them to vent out their perspective. Starting out as a very formal, low trust, almost hostile atmosphere, turned into a fertile environment for synergy. The conclusion, the members of the negotiating team basically said, we want to work with you. We want this deal. Let us know the price and we'll sign. Okay, so that's cool. All right, so next slide here. Seek to be understood. So the maturity, he talks about maturity as a balance between courage and consideration. So courage to do the things that you want that are good for you, and consideration being mindful of what other people's needs and wants are, right? And then he says, seeking to understand requires consideration. I need to be thinking about the other person. Seeking to be understood requires courage. I have to have the courage to say what my needs are, and I can't be passive.
Right, you make yourself vulnerable. You open yourself up, and that's courageous because I guess it's from the heart. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, you're being vulnerable because you can be also showing weakness too, right? And you're disclosing what your position is.
Right. And then that's why they talk about courage in the face of external challenges, because you could risk death or you could risk losing your finances or whatever. So it's like the same context, but in terms of your feelings. That's what he's saying, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like emotional courage.
Got it. Right.
Yeah.
So how, I mean, imagine this situation. So for example, the Israel-Palestine.
Mhm.
So you're standing, someone just accused, your tribe or your nation killing their family member. How do you be vulnerable? How do you open yourself to the people that, maybe have a very hatred impression about you or your people?
So remember, habit 4 is think win-win. And if somebody has a lose-win situation, they want you to lose and them to win, you can opt for no deal. Some contexts are not a moment of communication. Like if somebody is coming in to punch you, it's not a time to meditate and reflect, right?
Okay, I understand that, but I'm just talking about the reality because now the world are facing this kind of a situation, like
Yeah.
two country or two nations have a history of hatred towards each other. Oh, you just say okay, it's not the time to talk. Then we're forever not solving the problem. Forever there is a conflict.
I mean, like if we're in this building right now and it's on fire in this moment, it's not a time to negotiate. It's a survival situation. If the situation is one of negotiating, or at least saying I'm willing and open to negotiate, you just tell me no when you want to talk, right? Then you leave the door open for that context of negotiation. But some contexts, it's just there is negotiation. The person is
Okay.
like you are an object and you can be squished.
But from our observations, that kind of window seems, rarely happen or probably never exist, because now the hatred getting deeper and deeper, and generation after generation. I just don't know when the window of that negotiation can open,
Yeah, so Lex Friedman posed this question to Elon Musk. Okay, Elon Musk had a very good response. His response was, you demonstrate unquestioning signs of kindness. So it's like if there's a problem with some like country in Africa and they're being overrun by a fucking cartel or some shit, right? You can just give the villagers a whole bunch of food and they're like, oh, the United States is bad or the West is bad, right? Well, we can give them food and water, and then how are you going to say we're bad if we're doing something that's necessarily going to improve your well-being? And if you keep on making contributions to people like that, and then you also request, the other thing too is like, you can't just include everybody as one thing, like the Russian population. No, it's the Kremlin and Putin. That's really the issue. The Russian people, they're not necessarily to blame here.
What
right?
about the Gaza, the Middle East?
The Palestinians aren't responsible for decisions of Hamas, but at the same time, it's not good for them to be condoning Hamas either, right? If you know that there's a murderer like in your apartment building, he's like, yeah, I just murdered somebody. How are you doing today? I'm all right. Like, okay, I'm gonna go deal with the bodies. Like it's like you need to say we don't want Hamas in our country. We want to have an independent Islamic state that is not being run by some fascist version of Islam, And the problem, just like in Russia, is if you say that, they're going to kill you. And so I think that there needs to be some space where these disenfranchised or disadvantaged groups can at least communicate their dislike for those that are in power, the fascist regime or government or whatever the hell's going on, right?
I just feel like the reality is, it's probably more complicated than just what you just described, because some of this conflicts or issues or that it has a lot to do many factors, religion or history, whatever. They cannot just say, oh, because they're terrorists, so we shouldn't condone. It's the situation much more complicated than that.
Let's see what you guys say.
Yeah, so like in my country, in Bangladesh, so I don't know if you guys follow me. So we had a dictatorship for like 15 years, from 2008 till about like 3 months ago in July.
Sorry, man. Well, good for you guys to.
Yeah,
it's
so we
over.
threw away the dictator,
Good for
right?
you.
So they were like,
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
It was like the chance for like thousands and thousands of people like marched in the streets, and it was like a lot of people died. Police were shooting at them. I mean, you can look it up, everything online. And then finally, the prime minister had to quit and fled to India, right? Sheikh Hasina. She was ruling with an iron fist for 15 years, and the people just had enough. And I was one in the protest too.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, so everybody was on the street, and like we were like on the street for days on end, and thousands and thousands, lots of students too, like students from universities, high school students, even professionals. Like there were like probably at least 200 to 300,000 people on the streets,
Nice,
probably
nice.
more. And the government basically, and the government declared a curfew, so it was a shoot at sight. So anybody who got down to the street, police would be shooting at them, and people defied the curfew,
Nice.
right? And at one point, the police officers, they did shoot down a few people, but then how many are you going to shoot? There's 200,000 people on the street.
They're gonna rip you
Yeah,
apart.
yeah. At one point, the police officers are like, "Okay, we're not going to shoot you guys anymore,"
Yeah.
because they're running over the police, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't shoot 200,000 people. Nobody cares.
Who
about
wants
the
to?
Nobody cares about the curfew anymore, and people won. The
Good for you.
dictator had to leave.
That's
Exhibit
great.
A.
I love that. That's beautiful, man. Good for you.
But
Yeah.
well,
What do you got to say
There's
now,
a
huh?
specific clip.
look at 1989.
I'm
No,
sorry
we
to
don't-
interrupt.
we also went
There's
to
a
the street.
specific clip. I don't know. Everybody's like, I'll share it in the
Post in the group.
group
Sure.
where you can see the protesters bargaining with the police, and there's a specific point where they actually run over the police
Okay.
and they take over. And I'll find it.
Write a little caption just to explain why you're sharing, because not
Okay.
everyone's here.
Okay,
But that's good. Sure.
sure.
Okay, Dave. So go ahead.
Yeah, I admire everything there. I'm so happy. When I saw the news,
Oh, you saw that?
yeah, I
Okay,
saw
so
that
you know,
news,
okay.
and then people actually talk about that in China. But my question is, there's a lot other different this situation. In 1989 in China, we all went to the. I was also I went to the street, as well. I was a freshman. So, but the tank, everybody knows what happened. And also in World War II, the Jewish, they were in the ghetto, millions of them. But if they tried to fight, but they were no mercy, oppressed by the Nazi, So the situation depends,
Yeah.
Well,
So
part of it is
you also don't know. You
Yeah,
don't
like
know.
in our
You-
case,
you
the
don't know,
police and the army, the law enforcement, at one point they sided with the protesters. They just refused to follow orders. Right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
prime minister ordered, and she got mad. She's like, "Why are they even allowing these protesters? Why are there more guns? Why aren't they shooting them down?" But at one point, the army chief he put his foot down. The army chief had a meeting with the prime minister, the chief of army staff, and he said, "No, I'm not going to instruct my people to shoot these people. So either you're going to step down, or army's going to take over. There's going to be a martial law." So basically, the army chief forced her to step down. So the army chief is now our hero.
It was very sad,
Great
but
for you.
perhaps it's one iceberg. Who is
But like you
behind-
said, but if the army chief had been like, "Okay, we're going to follow orders and we're just going to shoot people," then yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
So,
What are you
good
gonna
job. But who is
And
behind
all-
the
yeah.
dictatorship? Because sometimes he's the face you can see.
The Sheikh
You know
Hasina.
how is
Yeah, the lady.
perhaps it's
The
my
lady,
other interest.
Yeah.
The case, for example, Gaddafi in Libya.
Right,
Okay, they killed him, all was fine. But what about the later
right.
Al Qaeda?
Like-
The population was totally.
Like what happened in Iran?
I mean, like it didn't start out as a dictatorship. She came through fair elections in 2008. She won, like how Trump won, but then she just never refused to leave.
Mhm.
Right? Once she's in office, then she just kept having fake elections every 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
with no opposition, no nothing. And out of 300 seats, we have 300 seats. She would win, her party would win like 260, 270. And every 5 years, they're the ones that come back to power.
Mhm, mhm.
With and the opposition just boycotts every election.
Those
So
are-
she's been doing that every year, every 5 years, and she did it 3 times in a row. Basically, how Putin does it. Putin has elections too.
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
always wins. So
Mhm.
does Xi Jinping, right? He has elections too.
Yeah.
And so Bangladesh, this woman was following China and Russia. They go, China and Russia has elections. We'll have elections too. So on paper, Bangladesh is a democratic country. We were having elections with just her party winning all the elections every time. And the
Well, hopefully,
opposition,
yeah, the United States.
Can I ask, when you went to street, you probably, I guess, you probably don't know
Yeah.
the police will side with you.
right,
not
right.
the-
No, I had
not the-
guns pointed at me
Right,
too.
so
yeah.
people, they don't know, probably they still think that the army or the police is still on
Yeah.
the side of the government and they could get killed.
Right.
My question is, with that, being unknown to you, why people or why you went to the street?
Because
Because there's a life threatening,
because they didn't go to the street in one day. Like I said, they survived this for 15 years. People were just sick of it, right? Prices of essentials were off the roof. There's massive corruptions, and people had no job. The economy is suffering, and people are like, okay, if we die, we're dying anyway, right? With no job, no money, no nothing, no food. So like we're dying anyway, so might as well we're gonna overthrow the dictator. Same with Libya and Gaddafi. If you look at history, how they threw away Saddam Hussein at Tiananmen Square, right?
Yeah.
So it was a revolution. Like Bangladesh, we had one in 1971 when we beat the Pakistani army and we gained independence from them, and now this is 2024. There's a second one. They're calling it the second revolution.
That's good. Well, let's keep it that way. Let's keep
Yeah.
it safe and fair democracy. No tyrants.
Yeah. We have a Nobel laureate running the country now, Dr. Muhammad Yunus.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobel Prize winner, yes.
That's
He
cool.
took over, yeah.
What a 180. I have a question for you, David, if I may.
Continue.
If I may, okay. So, because you mentioned you don't know the outcome, and I really like that statement because it's true. We cannot possibly know what's going to happen. So we have two scenarios: either we don't know the outcome and we do nothing, and that continues, or we don't know the outcome and we do something, and it may not turn out well, like you said, in certain cases. What would you choose? Because if people always chose to do nothing, imagine the state of the world if it even exists, even if it would exist to this day. So what would you say is the best option? To not know when to do nothing, or to not know when to try something?
Well, that's a very good one.
And to add to that, sorry, like you said, Rosa Parks, this one woman decided to sit in the bus.
Yeah.
If she was like, no, I'm not going to sit here, then that's it. Yeah, sorry.
I'm
just wanna
probably
say that.
doing a little bit, because it also took, it took 15 years, even in the Bangladesh case,
Yeah.
for people to realize, they have to do some, even risk their life. I'm just saying, because we're talking about risking their own life, when they make that, it's so difficult.
It
It's
is.
so difficult. It's like if I'm just saying, it took 15 years. Look at what happened in Burma. Back and forth. If everyone in Russia just go to the street, maybe Putin couldn't, but that's not the case. Why? I'm asking
Well, I
why.
think he gave the
If
answer.
thing is a simple, just straight. Oh, we don't do anything. We're gonna die anyway. But it's not like that.
No, like, even in this case, this went on for 45 days. It started in July, I think June, and then she finally stepped down in August. So it's not like the police on day one said they're not going to follow. Police were shooting people.
Yeah.
Police were doing their job, right? They were shooting at protesters. I think like a lot of people died. Army was shooting at protesters, but every day they shot people. The next day, more people came down. So today there's like 1,000 people. They killed 200. Tomorrow there's 5,000 people.
So
They kill another 100. Then the next day there's 10,000 people. So this went on for 45 days. And at one point, the army chief put his foot down and said, okay, we can't just keep killing people every day. This is not stopping. Like these guys are not going anywhere. And there's actually an interview of a police officer saying to another police officer, it's like, what do we do? If we shoot one guy, that guy falls, but the crowd is still there. The crowd doesn't disperse.
It's like zombies almost, but not.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like
So
just
usually
keep
what
going.
happens, like you're in the crowd, you shoot one guy, everybody runs away, right?
Yeah.
But in this protest, you shoot one guy, that guy is down, but the crowd is still there. Nobody's leaving.
Yeah, they're not scared.
They're
like,
not
"Fuck
scared.
you,"
They're like,
like,
yeah, shoot all of us. How
Yeah.
many people are you gonna shoot?
Well, I think you raised the point is it got
Yeah.
so bad, the
Yeah.
choice was either we die and starve to death
Yeah.
or we fight.
So at one point, the police and the law enforcement and the army, they're like, okay, we've done it. We followed your orders for 45 days, Madam Prime Minister.
Yeah.
But these guys are not going anywhere.
Yeah.
How many of we're not going to shoot anymore, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna, and that's when she decided to step down. So after 45, on day 45, the police and army said, okay, we're not going to shoot anymore. You guys can take over.
Okay, wait, Dodgy, you go to your point, and then we're going to continue.
Okay, I'm gonna let you continue. I'm just gonna make the slight point that I don't think people actually act based on like their political beliefs directly. People only act to direct stimuli, just like any other animal would. Most animals would react if you like directly impact them, like if you physically attack them or whatever in the moment, but they don't actually calculate long-term consequences and stuff like that. Human beings are the same way when we're in packs. When we're in groups, we don't actually calculate long-term things like we do when we're individually. And most people, they would just hear about people dying in the countryside and not care, unless there's some sort of politician that's kind of like riling up to act on behalf of people that that are suffering on the other side of the country or whatever. And I know this because I went through it in Ethiopia. We heard news of 60 people dying every day for years before a full-blown civil war started. And I know how people reacted. I remember people making casual jokes about it. So
I don't think joking about it isn't, I think that people do act on political decisions. Like Navalny from Russia was acting on a political decision. I think people are very responsive towards
And he gave
immediate,
his life for it, right?
yeah.
Right.
I think people are very responsive towards immediate threats, but it doesn't mean that all of the responses are limited to immediate threats for survival and stuff like that. People can make decisions based on ideals too, right?
Because I'm very
that's
curious about-
false.
Sorry?
That's false. It is not how it is in real experience, in live experience. People actually don't care. Politicians are needed to be in place to explain to people directly or indirectly how this will eventually affect them directly. It is not a matter of principle. Politics is not truly driven by principle. It's just the selfish desires of the majority that leads to politics, and how a minority of people just take advantage of that for status, which is the politicians.
Well, I don't agree with what you're saying. I think that some of what you're saying makes sense, but the way that it's put together, I think there's some, we have to unpack that and make sense of it. But I think that you're pointing out some things that are worth discussing. It's just let's just talk about it later, just because I'm going to get through some content and we've had a lot of
Can I ask one more? Just one. I'm just really curious about this, the human nature things.
Yeah.
Because when you describe the
Do you want to
situation-
play this clip really quick here? It's really interesting. I think everyone would like it. It's just it's like 30 seconds or a minute.
yeah. Okay. Well, send it to the group and then I can play it.
Yeah.
So I was wondering why at this moment, this year, after 15 years of protest, but this moment, then people will demonstrate that kind of the situation, like one man got killed and the other people don't just run away, they just stay there. How does human come to that stage? I was after 1989 in China, because the government do a reform and the economy it get better, so people just forget about it. And then all these years you don't see another 1989.
Let's just look at this really quick. Okay, so push it to 2 minutes. It's a whole 8 minutes. Yeah, go. Okay, yeah, just right there, yeah. Okay. Yeah, play from there. So you see how they're like there. You see the thousands of people, and you will see that they will actually break the barricades and go. This is what I'm talking about. Look, these are the law enforcement, and these are the protesters,
Yeah.
right? How are you gonna like stop these silly people?
That's crazy. It goes on forever.
No, and just watch 1 minute and see how they're gonna break and the police are just gonna step aside. They're like, okay, we're gonna let you guys go through.
What are they blocking off?
They're trying to go to the prime minister's home. This is the day the prime minister resigned. They basically took over the White House, our White House. Okay, see, look, okay, there you go. Yeah, look, there you go. That's where the government ended.
That's good. I like that. That's when the government ended.
Yeah. See how they broke off, or the police are just standing down. They're not doing anything anymore. They're like, okay, we're not gonna stop.
They're gonna be crazy. They're gonna kill all of those police officers.
Yeah. How are you gonna shoot this kid?
Shouldn't, first of all. Right?
That's an awesome speech. That's the curfew. That day was like a shoot at fight day. Right?
Yeah.
I'm probably in the car too.
Cool, man. I love that. Okay, very good. Let's
I just wanted to see
thank
that.
you. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
And, to answer your question about what brings a person to that point to want to protest,
So you see how the police like stand down, right? At
Like-
first
like-
they're trying to
like-
block them.
Like,
I
why,
believe-
why
at
this
one
thing
point-
not happen 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Why? If
Well, I think it's
that's my
because
question.
they became so impoverished that there's a breaking limit. I think that's the point. And so
15
like
years, yeah.
a dictator is almost trying to maintain the balance between breaking point and power. And they want to take as much power away.
He's
for
saying why it
themselves.
doesn't happen to Russia or China.
They just haven't reached the
So
breaking
another
point.
way is if the breaking point is not achieved, then we won't see this.
Yes.
I feel like
See,
With
so it's
time-
not that simple. It's not like
It is, because
Mhm.
everybody has the capacity to do that, right? And if you believe that you shouldn't do it, then you won't do it, and we're all fucked. That's what's gonna happen.
Okay. So
Also, sorry, just real quick to add to that, and this whole movement actually started with 6 people, 6 university students started this movement,
you go.
and then it moved on to like thousands and millions of people.
that's cool, man.
At first, it was just 6 people. It was 5 male students, 1 female student, and it was the 6 guys that started this movement. They're like, we're sick of this. We don't want this government. And the first thing the government is arrest those 6 people, put them in jail. As soon as they got arrested, more people started coming out.
Right.
That's cool. Yeah. It's good.
I agree with David though. I think David's point was right.
So, like you said, it's one person makes a difference.
Yeah,
This whole thing
yeah.
started with just 6 people saying we're not going to
Yeah.
take the shit anymore.
Amazing.
Okay, all right. So the bus is going on. So very good. So the quick response is some contexts, it's not necessarily appropriate to be getting empathetic for the tyrannical government that's trying to kill you, right? It's more about preservation and survival and protecting our
we're
autonomy.
coming back. Oh, sorry.
That was the main deviation.
Oh,
from the-
okay, okay,
Okay.
cool.
So, all right, now next slide. So he gives these 3 distinctions that he talks about when you're making a presentation to people. First, we have the ethos or your personal credibility inspired by trust in your integrity and competency. So character is number 1. Pathos being empathetic, your emotions and the emotions of others, and then logos, your logic and reasoning.
I believe
So
pathos more like translates better to passion.
Yes.
yeah, I know, but we're just working with the ethos. Sequence,
sorry.
ethos is your character, pathos is the relationships between people or the passionate connection, you could argue, and then the logic of the presentation. And then lastly,
Where's bravery come from? From pathos or from logic? Bravery.
probably from pathos.
Yeah.
You can think about what is the right thing to be brave about it and then engage in bravery that way. I think there's more than one thing. You can think about what the right thing to do is and then do the right thing. You don't have to just be reactive. And then the last slide, effective production capability. So the example of the university professor looking for funding. The research committee won't listen to him. So he empathized with the committee and understood their frame of mind. And then his in-depth understanding had logic behind it. And then they eventually gave him funding. So he says, present our ideas clearly, specifically, visually, and contextually. The context of deep understanding of paradigms and concerns will significantly increase the credibility of your ideas when you understand the context. And ideas may change because you can learn the process of understanding or learn through the process of understanding, which also gives you greater accuracy and integrity in your presentations. Okay, so let's go to the text. We are on page 293. Then seek to be understood. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Knowing how to be understood is the other half of habit 5. equally critical in reaching win-win solutions. Defined maturity as the balance between courage and consideration. Seeking to understand requires consideration. Seeking to be understood takes courage. Win-win requires a high degree of both. The early Greeks, magnificent philosophy that is embedded in the three sequential arranged words, ethos, pathos, logos, suggest these three words to contain the essence of seeking first to understand and making effective presentations. Ethos is your personal credibility, the faith people have in your integrity and competency, trust that you inspire, your emotional bank account. Pathos is the empathetic side. The feeling means you're in alignment with the emotional thrust of another person's communication. Logos is the logic, the reasoning part of the presentation. The sequence, ethos, pathos, logos, your character, your relationships, and the logic of your presentation is important. It's another paradigm shift. Making presentations, a lot of people go straight to the reasoning. They try to convince people the validity of their logic without first taking their ethos and pathos into consideration. So for example, he had an acquaintance who was frustrated because his boss was locked into what he felt was an unproductive leadership style. Why doesn't he do anything? He asked. Well, why don't you make an effective presentation? I did. How did you define effective? Effective means it works. It means production capability. Did you create the change you wanted? Did you build the relationship in the process? What were the results of your presentation? He didn't do anything. He wouldn't listen. Then make an effective presentation. You have to empathize with his head, get into his frame of mind. 294. Make your point simply and visually and describe the alternative he is in favor of better than he can himself. That will take some homework. Are you willing to do that? Why do I have to go through all that? If you want to change his whole leadership style and you're not willing to change your method of presentation, well, I guess that's what's going on. Just smile about it and learn to live with it then. I can't live with it. It compromises my integrity. Then get to work on an effective presentation. That's in your circle of influence. In the end, he wouldn't do it. Another acquaintance, so that's the person who chose to not take initiative or be proactive. I don't even know why he gave that as an example.
Right, it doesn't make
It's
sense.
sort of stupid, isn't it? Right? From a writing perspective.
I was wondering,
Anyways,
Because the guy didn't give his reasons why he denied it.
he just
He just said no.
he just didn't do it.
He just didn't do it.
So it's like, then Covey, isn't your presentation ineffective to him about presentations? Anyways,
Meta.
I know. A university professor was willing to pay the price. He said, I can't get to first base, not in the girl he was dating, but in the funding he needed for his research. His research was not in the mainstream of his department. And so he suggested he develop an effective presentation using ethos, pathos, and logos. I know you're sincere and the research you want to do would bring great benefits. Describe the alternative they are in favor of better than they can themselves. Show that you understand them in depth. Carefully explain the logic behind your request. I will try. Do you want to practice? So they did a dress rehearsal. They, we went through it with Covey. He went to make his presentation. Let me see if I first understand what your objectives are and what your concerns are about this presentation and my recommendation. He took the time to do it slowly. We went into his presentation. Let me see if I understand your thing. It took his time to do it slowly, gradually. The middle of his presentation demonstrated in-depth understanding and respect for their point of view. So he comprehends their perspective. As soon as they felt that occurred, the senior professor turned to another professor and nodded, turned back to him and said, you got your money. When you can present your ideas clearly, specifically, visually, and contextually, in the context of deep understanding of the other person's paradigms and concerns, you significantly increase the credibility of your ideas. 295. You're not wrapped up in your own thing, delivering grandiose rhetoric from a soapbox. You really understand. What you're presenting may even be different from what you had originally thought, because in your effort to understand, you learned. Habit 5 lifts you to a greater accuracy, greater integrity in your presentations. People know that. They know you're presenting the ideas you genuinely believe, taking all the known facts and perceptions into consideration, which will benefit everyone. Okay. All right. Well, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. Let's do that. Right? That's good so far. So next slide. One-on-one. So habit 5 is in the middle of your circle of influence. So this goes back to habit 1, being proactive, where there's things that I have some control over or influence, and there are things that I care about, my concerns. And it's more beneficial for us, for all of our efforts, to focus on our circle of influence, which you have control over. So increasing our influence is within our circle of concern. More understanding of others increases our appreciation for them. When others don't open up to us about problems, you can empathize with their behavior. Be patient, respectful, discerning, sensitive, and aware. Proactively create opportunities to prevent problems. Slide 2. So we give as an example of role-playing effective solutions to past issues. Share different perceptions of the situation. role play past situations that were difficult or stressful. So that's a very good technique for training, obviously, in variety of contexts. And then one-on-one employee time, listen and understand your employees, seek to understand before problems arise, before evaluation and prescription, before you present your own ideas. So again, this notion of being proactive specifically with empathy. So habit 5 is powerful, 295, because it is right in the middle of your circle of influence. Many factors in interdependent situations are in your circle of concern: problems, disagreements, circumstances, other people's behavior. If you focus your energies out there, you deplete them with few positive results because you don't have control over those things.
Question.
Yes.
So they talk about circle of influence, right? So I want to use the example of the 6 guys that start the very
movement,
first.
yeah.
You know, probably they know they're going to be thrown into the jail.
Yeah, they were in
So
jail.
so when they stand up, you think they are doing things in their circle of influence?
Well, yeah. So they were concerned about the government, and then they said, "What can we do? We can protest." So then they did that.
Oh, and these 6 guys, they're actually university students. They're not even adults. All of them go to Dhaka University, which is like a big university in our country. Like, like
Yeah.
this one.
That's
At this time, when we talk about the martyrs, when Jesus Christ, they dies.
Sure.
What about the people they want to persuade other people? One example, Demosthenes, a Greek philosopher, or the oratorian Roman.
Mhm.
It's nothing. This is totally many constraints, barriers. He put stones and try to speak to others to persuade. The same with Cicero. Cicero was a new Roman, and they try to convince others with the word. In this case, they don't need any kind of violence. The only thing they need intelligence. And we have many
Sure.
examples.
Yeah, and 1 second. In that context, they have the capacity to speak into reason, right?
The
But
capacity,
even then,
the capacity.
it still doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, like if there is a forum for free speech, you know, there are still maybe other factors influencing whether people agree with you or they even understand. We can talk about that, but they may not always understand. You can have legitimate arguments and they may still disagree with them. Sorry, 1 sec. You have to respond first.
Yeah, so like the 6 guys, another thing was after they were arrested, because it's a dictatorship.
Yeah.
I mean, she went all out to try to keep. So basically, they made them have a televised statement, right? Under duress. So they made these 6 guys go on TV in custody from the prison. They're like, okay, we're withdrawing this movement. I'm asking all my supporters to step down. You guys all go home. Everything is fine. But then when they made that statement, and I guess they had some sign language or something, they just, you know, people are like, okay, if these guys are making the statement, why are they making this statement from prison?
Yeah,
Let them
obviously.
go, right? So they actually, the prime minister made them give a statement from prison that, you know, they told their supporters to go home, but their supporters didn't go home anyway.
So that's great. You know, so I think that the government did a very bad PR. You know, from the government side. I'm just saying, you know, like I'm wondering this kind of sacrifice himself can be explained by the circle of influence. Like the guy, even somebody got shot, he still stand up. Does that time he think he's still standing up? Is it because circle of influence? I was wondering, can that be explained? Because maybe he's just coming from some pathos. Maybe the bravery.
Sure.
Maybe he just doesn't care
Sure.
anymore. He doesn't think about. So that's my question. You know.
So they're ready to be martyred, right? They're
Yeah,
ready to die for
like
their
the
country.
martyr's behavior
Yeah.
seems. I don't know.
Well, you brought this up before when you talked about if being a martyr for political reasons. This has been an ongoing thread, so we can continue this thread, right? It's good that you're here because you have a great example. Then it's good for you, right? Here's this example. He said, how can there be an evolutionary instinct for this when it directly goes against our self-interest? You're going to die and you're not going to procreate, right? So how do we even have the capacity for this, right? Why aren't humans perpetually oppressed, as an example, like, you know? And so I think it's because our instinct as conscious beings will always resist constraint, unless that constraint, so for the psychopath, it may not be justified. They're the ones that say, I don't care if you think it's immoral. The only thing that matters is me and what I like to eat, right? And that's like, well, I don't want you to eat me though. I don't care if you think I taste good.
I think it's also how far we extend our own identity, right? The way a mother would sacrifice her life for a child, or a parent would sacrifice her life for a child. you know, maybe those gentlemen identified so strongly with the people, with the culture, that they felt compelled to do it, potentially, right?
Yeah.
Because their identity is not just me. It's not
Yeah,
a
exactly.
me thing,
That's a very
right?
good point.
Yeah, the government didn't go so far as to kill them, but they did get tortured. They were in a torture cell for a long time. But they didn't actually like, shoot them and kill them, because that would have just erupted another whole thing.
Mhm.
But they were in custody pretty much the entirety of this revolution happening,
Yeah.
and they got out after the government got thrown off.
I'm happy that you got good people there, man. I'm happy that you guys helped yourselves.
Again, sometimes you don't need martyrs, so you need ideas. In case of French Revolution, Rousseau, the philosopher, so inspire other people just to talk.
Yeah, great. That's
And
good.
he said, I don't need martyrs. I don't think I try to convince you only with my speech.
Very good. Okay, let's continue. The boat continues. You can always seek first to understand. That's something that's within your control. As you do that, you focus on your circle of influence. You really deeply understand other people. Accurate information to work with. You get the heart of matters quickly. You build the emotional bank accounts, and you give people the psychological air they need so you can work together effectively. This is an inside-out approach. As you do it, you watch what happens in your circle of influence. They would grow because you really listen. You become influenceable. Being influenceable is the key to influencing others. Well, that's redundant. Your circle begins to expand. You increase your ability to influence many things in your circle of concern. Watch what happens to you. The more deeply you understand other people, the more you will appreciate them. The more you will the more reverent you'll feel about them. I don't even know that word, but I think it's feeling good. Touch the soul of another human being is to walk on holy ground. Again, they're Christian references. I'm like, whatever. No disrespect, but it's just, yeah.
Taken.
Habit 5 is something you can practice right now. The next time you communicate with anyone, put aside your own autobiography and genuinely seek to understand. Even when people don't want to open up about their problems, you can be empathetic. You can sense their hearts, how they feel, their hurt. You can respond. You can show understanding and respect. 296. Don't push, be patient, be respectful. People don't have to open up verbally before you can empathize. You can empathize all the time with their behavior. You can be discerning, sensitive, and aware, and you can live outside your autobiography when it's needed. If you're highly proactive, you can create opportunities to do preventative work. You don't have to wait until your son or daughter has a problem. Spend time with your children now, one-on-one. Listen to them, understand them. Look at your home, your school, the challenges and problems they're facing. Look in their eyes. Build the emotional bank account. Give them psychological air. Let them speak and talk and vent. Go out with your spouse on a regular basis. Have dinner. Do something together you both enjoy. Listen to each other. Seek to understand. See life through each other's eyes. So, for example, his wife Sandra, they seek to understand with each other often. They take the time to actually practice empathetic listening, skills to help communicating with their children so they can be better parents together. Share our different perceptions of the situation. We role play for more effective approaches to difficult interpersonal family problems. Act as if I'm a son or daughter requesting a special privilege, even though I haven't fulfilled a basic family responsibility. And they do this role play stuff. Interact back and forth and try to visualize the situation in a very real way so we can train ourselves to be consistent and modeling and teaching correct principles to our children. And that's when you're deciding to have kids with somebody, the traits that you want them to demonstrate in your relationship, right? I feel this. Well, why do you feel that way? Oh, because this happened. And then you talk about it, right? That's what dating is for. And then once somebody has shown that consistently in different states of mind and in different circumstances, then you can think about a committed relationship. That's a good test, right? Most helpful role plays come from redoing past difficult or stressful scene in which one of us blew it. What's up?
No, I'm just
Wow.
because we're talking about relationship. You know?
Okay,
That's a
so
very interesting topic.
you just want to go into it. You're like, let's just fucking talk about it. We're almost going to finish this chapter. It would be good to finish it. We're almost done.
I would like to have some personal testimony.
We can talk. The time you fuck man. The time ask Dimitri. Dimitri's like, oh, you can fucking Achilles' recent stories are not good. Personal testament to relationships.
Oh.
You talk about
your life
dating.
pretty well.
If you're going to talk about texting, that's a good text for dating.
Yeah, but I'm going through a divorce right now, if that helps.
Well, we can talk.
Power to you, man. Power to you.
You too?
No, I think power to you.
Okay. That's why I'm here, because I'm depressed.
I'm a mental health counselor. We can talk if you want.
Yeah,
Came to the
okay.
right place.
I thought you would find the ideal, perfect partner at the movement. You know,
Yeah.
Maybe.
going together to the street. You know,
No. Well, I mean, we have kids, we have a kid, so, it's complicated.
I'm sorry. I hope it's going to be okay. You're going to figure it out.
Okay. Yeah, well, I might take you up on that counseling offer.
For sure. We can talk about it.
Might need that, yeah.
So the time you invest to deeply understand the people you love brings tremendous dividends in the open communication. Problems that plague families and marriages simply don't have time to fester and develop. Communication becomes so open, potential problems can be nipped in the bud. Great reserves for trust in the emotional bank account to handle the problems that do arise. For example, in business, you can set up one-on-one time with your employees, listen to them, understand them, set up human resource accounting or stakeholder information systems, 297. Honest, accurate feedback at every level. So that's going to that CEO disease problem I was talking about. Customers, suppliers, employees. Make the human element as important as the financial or technical element. Again, this is written in a time where transactional relationships were transformational was just kind of starting in some ways, like after like the 60s and 70s and stuff like that, those ideas. Human resources on a business at every level. Listen, and when you listen, you learn. Give the people who work for you and with you psychological air. You inspire loyalty that goes well beyond the 9 to 5 physical demands of the job. Seek first to understand before the problems come up. Before you try to evaluate and prescribe, before you try to present your own ideas, seek to understand. Powerful habit of effective interdependence. And honestly, like the community housing program that I run, I got to do this all the time. You know, all the time. And earlier, when you talked about how it's difficult to be empathetic, I think you missed the glaring challenge here. And that is when someone makes you angry. When someone does something to you, and it's not even that you perceived malicious intent, they actually have malicious intent.
Right.
And so now it's like you've given me every reason to be fucking pissed off.
So how do we navigate that?
Yeah, exactly. And so in those moments, there is some training, like with some practice, you get better at just like, people can use the phrase being professional, but it just having some reserve or resilience and not being reactive to those emotions. So self-awareness, emotional intelligence, self-awareness is like number one. Realizing that you're not at baseline, right? My baseline is now shifted. I'm at like -3 out of 10. And so if I know that, I'm not 100% of sound mind. And so I may need to do things first. So the principle that I have is deal with emotions first and people second, right? And they may have been the object of your emotion. They did something that made you upset. But the hazard of those emotions getting in the way and preventing them from understanding what your perspective is very high. So the best thing to do in a mature context is take the time to reflect and meditate on what's made you upset, deal with your distorted thinking. Again, that's a technical thing. You got to learn to do that. And then think about how to communicate to this other person, how their transactions have affected you, or just have boundaries. Call the police. Do what you have to protect yourself from this other person.
Mhm.
But the moments where it's the hardest is perceived injustice for sure.
Mhm.
Right?
How do you train your emotional intelligence? Because your IQ is quite, I cannot study, but learn by heart, mathematics, whatever. It's but what about your emotional intelligence?
Well, so yeah, it's a skill, right? So first thing is meditating.
So skill you mean is no way to train?
No, it's exactly something to be trained. So emotion, it's not just a trait that you have no control over, right? So when you meditate, if you do a mindful meditation for 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening, 20 minutes a day, even people that have the self-report that they don't believe that meditation does anything, when they measure their effectiveness in the real world, right at work, for example, on the days that they meditate compared to the days that they don't, the days that they meditated, they have higher performance, right? And problem solving, emotional resilience, right? Because the prefrontal cortex, the gray matter increases in density, right? And so that gives you greater executive function. It gives you more emotional control, more awareness
Do
of
you
yourself.
meditate? Or,
Yeah, as much as I can.
oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Is there a specific type of meditation you do, or
Yeah, I have 3 different kinds that I talk about. There's mindfulness meditation, where you're
you
just
observe your breath? Or?
yeah, like so you need an object of attention. So one could be the breath. You can do the Zen thing where you look at a flame, right? You can just look at a dot on the wall. And what you're doing is you're not letting anything obstruct that attentional focus.
Okay.
So if something comes like a thought, like the ex-wife, then the thought comes and you don't attach to it, you just let it go, right? You're mindful that it's there, but you don't attend on it. You don't put effort on fixating that as a thing. You just let it be. Or your self-narrative, your self-talk, right? Similar thing. And so then there's like no mind meditation where you actually just try to have nothing in mind, right? It's not just like mindfulness. It's just
How
like,
does that work practically?
so when you're in,
And then there's like Zen meditation, transcendental meditation. It's so
yeah, Zen meditation is when you're focusing on like the flame,
Okay.
right? And so I have stuff on the website where
Transcendental is you chant a word or something, isn't it?
transcendental. I'm not 100%. We have to look that one up.
Oh.
I don't know.
And then there's vipassana meditation, right?
Yeah,
There's so many
the mindfulness is like the vipassana.
vipassana. Okay.
Yeah, it's very close.
And they have the vipassana. They have a 10-day retreat too.
Yeah, you can go to the retreat. Yeah, yeah.
I've
So
been there
that's,
twice.
Oh, you did
Yeah,
you done it?
twice.
Okay. Good for you.
so
Vipassana?
Vipassana.
Okay.
so that's one mode of increasing self-awareness and having a
I
sense
did
of,
one in Bali one time in Indonesia. It was
Nice.
a 5-day retreat. Yeah.
that's cool. That's good. So that's the first step, is the self-awareness thing. And then, and knowing how to structure your life so that you can make yourself feel good, right? And there's certain things like exercising and healthy diet, sleeping. There's certain biological things that you kind of have to do, right? And then there's your social life, making sure you navigate that. You have to have boundaries with people or not see people, right? Or be around certain people because they're healthy, like being here if it's healthy for you. And then there's the distorted thinking stuff. You have to go through that. And so, yeah. What was the question again? How to have more emotional intelligence?
Train your emotion. You
Yeah, yeah.
change your train.
Yeah.
Meditation is one for.
So that's part of it. And yeah. And then there's a couple other things too.
I want to add something to that. How it's weird when you say, when you ask God to be less angry, or you ask the universe or the cosmos, wherever you want, that attraction, whichever way you want to do it, whichever perception. When you ask, for example, because I had asked for me to stop becoming so easily angry all the time, and then I wasn't magically presented calamity. I was tested now even more times with situations that would make me very, very mad. And then through each situation, I saw it becoming more and more under control by observing it, seeing where the mistake was, what triggered me. And the next time, just right before, become conscious, before you respond, and you go into the breath again. And then through time, it's like leveling up. That was my personal.
Very good. Okay, let's
Sorry,
continue.
sorry,
Yeah.
one question.
So ask God, I never know.
This is good. I just had a feeling that many times I feel like my hands are so full. There's so many things to do. I mean, like this is great. This spend time, communicating like here with his wife. That he wouldn't trade for anything.
Mhm.
But it takes time. It takes a lot of time to do this quality communications.
Mhm.
And then, in the meantime, you have so many things to do in a day. You have to take care of the kids. That go to the work. I mean, you have to manage the philosophy society. I often have that feeling of my hands are full,
You're overwhelmed.
So
Yeah.
so how in the meantime, this is good.
Yeah.
It takes time. How do you do that? How do you manage this?
So it's complementary
Overwhelmed.
relationships. It's like some people, communication will be very fluid and very easy, and they will kind of just understand you, right? And you'll feel good around them. Their personality just makes you feel better about yourself. And that's a reason to spend time with them, right? Other people, like lacking cognitive capacity, for example, they may not understand things or perceive things correctly. And they systematically are wrong in how they see information. So it's going to require a lot of communication, right? And it's never going to end, And so some relationships are more compatible than others. And so I would say you have a life. You're just a regular person. Nothing wrong with it, right? And you have a lot to do, just like in the waking life. He's like, some people are faced with an abundance of life, and some people don't. They're bored. They don't have enough. And the guy's like, I'm of the latter. I have an abundance in life. There's more that I can do. There's more out there for me to want to do than I can actually do.
So you are saying the solution is to seek the right partner.
Fill your life with all the things that make you happy, and then the right person will fit into that life and will not take you away from it.
Wow, I like that. I should write that down.
Right?
It's
in video.
really good.
It's on video. You have it there.
Yeah, see, it's easy.
So Dimitri made a point earlier about your life is only as big as your experiences. Something to that effect. I'm hoping not. Which
You're only
Let's go for coffee.
as big
Yeah,
as
let's go for coffee.
where you've been.
to where you've been
Yeah.
Oh, for coffee with it.
Physically.
physically. So
I
your
guess mentally
experience,
too.
experiences.
Yeah, like experiences like in different countries, experience different cultures, exploring different parts of their minds,
Right,
places you explore.
right. Which means like you have a larger frame of reference, so that way you'll figure out specifically what makes you fulfilled, what makes you happy, what you want to move towards, what you want to move away from. And that way, when you kind of like explore the territory, then you know, okay, well, I guess this is really more for me. I like this green area here as opposed to these blue
Oh, yeah.
areas. Or whatever.
It's like cross-referencing.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah,
Same thing
exactly.
like with studying different subjects.
Yeah.
Like find a way to.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's you gotta know yourself first. Like, right, the Oracle of Delphi, Socrates is know thyself.
Like he didn't know himself then either. He was like 8 years old.
Wow. Okay, we're gonna finish this chapter here. So, 297. When we really deeply understand each other, we open the door to creative solutions and third alternatives, not the either or. There could be other options. Our differences are no longer assembly blocks to communication and progress. They become stepping stones to synergy, which is this next chapter. So we have application suggestions. Last slide for this. Write down a situation from other people's perspective. Develop empathy by listening. Observe others' emotions. Create emotional bank deposit by acknowledging and apologizing. So I'm going to go into these in a little bit more depth. 297. So the first one is select a relationship in which you sense the emotional bank account is in the red. So it's low. We have negative feelings for each other. Try to understand and write down the situation from the other person's point of view. In your next interaction, listen for understanding, comparing what you're hearing and what you wrote down. How valid were your assumptions? Did you really understand that individual's perspective? Number 2, share the concept of empathy with someone close to you. Tell him or her you want to work on really listening to others and ask for feedback in a week. How did you do? How did you make that person feel? Number 3, an opportunity to watch people communicate. Cover your ears and just watch. What emotions are being communicated that may not come across in words alone? Number 4, you're inappropriately using one of the autobiographical responses. Try to turn the situation into a deposit by acknowledging and apologizing. Number 5, 298. Base your next presentation on empathy. Describe the other point of view as well as or better than its proponents. Then seek to have your point understood from their frame of reference. So these are some good practice things. Okay, let's just go through these last few pages for the last section of the book. I have 20 minutes until 10. So this is his son, Sean Covey, adding to this. So he's talking about how he graduated from business school and he was unsure of whether he should work for Disney or his dad's leadership center. And he tagged along with his father. His dad was, Stephen Covey, the guy who wrote the book, was teaching Habit 5 to 200 senior leaders, speaking about the skill of empathy, how to rephrase the content and reflect the feeling of what another person is saying. If you can learn to listen empathetically, you can be 10 times more effective with people. To demonstrate, his father, Stephen Covey, was pretending to be a teenager who wanted to drop out of school. And then the participants were going to play the father, and they would try to listen and empathize. The leaders didn't get it. They kept on blowing again and again, kept on responding incorrectly with the autobiographical response. Participants were getting frustrated. They're like, what's the point of this? The atmosphere was becoming chaotic. Someone finally managed to reflect back an empathetic response. And then Covey opened up a bit. He became a bit more transparent. So another person reflect back another empathetic response, and then they were getting the hang of it. Little by little, they responded empathetically in the role of the father. And then Covey kept on opening up. The son's real issue was unraveled and solved. It was a transformative experience. Leaders, all competent and accomplished people, 299, understood empathy and its importance for the first time in their lives. The atmosphere in the room turned from chaos to enlightenment. The leaders would never be the same. So for the rest of this part, he just kind of asks some questions or answers some questions. Should you use Habit 5 all the time? No. There's a time and place for empathetic listening. Using empathetic listening when the topic is important, sensitive, or really personal, like career advice or a communication problem with a loved one. These conversations take time and can't be rushed. A good rule of thumb is to use empathy anytime emotions are high. You don't need to do it in a casual conversation or everyday talk. Why is this habit so hard? If you struggle with this habit, it's hard. For example, it's hard to listen when you know you're right. Habit 5, some people do very poorly at it. They think they're a good listener, but in reality, they're listening from their own frame of reference and not from the frame of reference of other person. They're listening with an agenda, with the intent to respond, not to understand. They never get into the person's head. They miss out on a lot, not uncovering core issues and never fully getting engaged in people's hearts as they could. Listening empathetically gets even harder when you're in a leadership position. People tend to defer to authority. Why so many senior leaders are poor listeners, 300. Most of the time talking anytime they're in the room. Professor talks about the power paradox, Dachau Keltner. Describe how leaders gain influence through empathy and practices that serve others. lose those skills as they gain influence and power. The further you go up in the ladder, the less empathy leaders tend to have. If you're in a leadership role and you're in a meeting, what percentage of the words spoken in this meeting today come from my own mouth? There's 6 people in the room, 80% of the words came from you. That's a problem. Again, maybe not. Maybe you're teaching them and whatever, but that's fine. We understand what you're trying to say. If you're cooperating, we should, and there's people need to say stuff and you're not letting them say stuff, then we understand you should let them talk. His colleague, Jay Hudson, how listening through an autobiographical lens can cause serious misunderstanding. So this guy worked for the Colorado Department of Corrections, like a jail, in an incident, one of our units between a sergeant and an offender, one of the criminals. The offender was being transferred to another facility, had to undergo a routine property inventory before being transferred. The sergeant had a speech impediment and was stuttering. And he was extremely upset because the offender was making fun of him by mocking and stuttering. Then he turned his attention to the offender, to the criminal. The sergeant who did the property inventory on him had been imitating the offender's stuttering. Now I got it. Both the sergeant and the offender both had speech impediments that caused them to stutter. And they both thought the other person was mocking them. They both struggled with the same challenge. Once the sergeant realized what had taken place, he went to the offender, shook his hand, and apologized for the misunderstanding. In the correctional environment, a misunderstanding can create a volatile situation very quickly. Seeking first to understand in all situations is key to preserving safety and security. So that's cool. 301. Do you struggle with this habit? Yes. Continually remind myself to get out of my own head and into the head of another. For example, he wanted to be a quarterback in university. He had knee surgery and couldn't do it anymore. Again, this is the son of Stephen Covey. When they got married, they had a son. He wanted to teach him everything he knew about being a quarterback, how to command in the huddle, how to read defenses, et cetera, et cetera. He spent a lot of time being his coach and the coach of the other kids. And then the summer before 9th grade, his son came up to him and said, I don't want to play football. And then the son of Stephen Covey, the dad in the story, got mad. He's like, do you know how many years we spent training you? And you don't want to play anymore. And then how could I persuade him? I tried by making him feel guilty, saying we're going to throw away all this effort we put in, but nothing seemed to influence him. Then Sean Covey was at work with his team where he was designing workshops, exercises around empathetic listening. I like these examples of hypocrisy. It's funny. Or just like not practicing what you preach. Because they're good, but it's like it does happen. And me teaching this is good for me so I can learn not to be an idiot. Right? Or whatever. Oh my goodness, I'm not doing any of this. I've grown up with this content, written a book on it, and forgotten to live the habit. Go back to the beginning, win a private victory, use self-awareness from habit 1, caught myself and created a space to choose my response. Realized how much my ego was tied to the success of my son, thought I was doing the best for him. I was really trying to live out my unfulfilled desires through him. I moved to habit 2. Do I want to raise a son or a quarterback? Page 302. You know what? I spent a decade hoping my son would become an all-state quarterback. Then I shook my head and thought, duh, of course I want to raise a son. I wanted to stay close to him. I want him to fulfill his own dreams. A few days later, a conversation naturally came up. Tell me more about not wanting to play this season. This time I didn't have an agenda. I just wanted to understand. Then the kid's like, I didn't have a good experience. And he's like, I got killed. He's like, I'm way smaller than all the other players. He's like, when you were my age, you were bigger than me, but I'm small. I'm like 30 pounds lighter than everybody else. And he's scared about playing this year because the guys are way bigger. He's gonna get hurt even more. And then now that he understood, he's like, what should I do, Dad? And he's like, I spent days trying to basically coerce him, not persuade, with no result. Then he's being empathetic, and then persuasion came in. He was able to influence him. I think you should do whatever you want to do. And he's like, I'm going to play football this year. And then eventually got injured. So the kid's fears were correct, you know? Yeah, but he's like, at least I didn't compromise the relationship. I caught that I wasn't communicating well early on. And I was able to be there for him when it was an important conversation, like his relationships or getting married and stuff. Next question.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So they talk about empathetic listening, right? They said we should use the word topic is important, whatever. So the presidential debate, they're talking about things that are so important to the country. Why these two candidates are not practicing empathetic listening? They're just attacking. They are just there's no empathy there.
Yeah, it's a great criticism. I think it's well, sometimes they do. Like JD Vance and Wallace, when they were talking, like they would agree with each other, and it was nice to see those two guys like speaking in this way.
But most of the time, they're these days, they are not. They're like what happened to the Liz Cheney.
Yeah, Cheney.
The Trump said if he get,
Elected, should go to jail or something.
but something like that,
Yeah.
there's no, why is that?
Well, it's just, he is not being philosophical. His-
Not just he, but all these years, the presidential debate.
Yeah.
It's,
people
they-
just,
the candidate just attacking each other.
yeah, it's just poor argument strategies that are based on system one thinking, like our basic evolutionary instincts, right? Like fear and, I don't know, self-interest, right? Like having access to bacon, for example. Just because some people can't buy bacon doesn't mean that the country's in shit, right? They just don't have the skills, and they're,
They don't have
or they're just using a different mode of communicating that does have some effects, but you also lose this stuff, right? And so I think that some people are more responsive to system one thinking, and there's a way to kind of appeal to both the intellectual rational argument and then the emotion-based instinct kind of appeal.
Yeah, but this kind of, this pattern, not just the presidential debate, but you can see this kind of pattern, in the House, in Britain, in the Congress, the party and the opposition party just, fighting each
Yeah,
other,
yeah. Well, I think it's just that there's something to be said. Let's do a consulting company and get a contract to teach these guys to communicate better. That's just there's just an open market there for this as a service. That's all. They're just not, they're losing something because they're not doing something that would be good for them. And that's where the Philosophy Society Consulting Division would take that contract. We would send people in there, teach them some stuff, and then at least you're going to get some respect because the way that you're communicating in public is not just being overtly offensive. But some people like that. They like the shit talk, and that's maybe one of the reasons why Trump got elected, because they just enjoy it.
This is different from everybody else.
Yeah, like it goes back to that whole thing. If the majority of people value this thing, then they will just choose that thing. So we need to teach people skills first for them to even value this way of being. Otherwise, they're just used to the reality TV show shit talking kind of context. Okay, continuing. We increasingly communicate via text, email. Does that change anything about this habit? Yes, it definitely does. Someone gets upset and sends a pointed email. A person writes back a novel. Then they start copying people and more people. And then he's like, stop emailing each other and including everybody. Just go and talk about what your problem is. The use of technology strips out the tone of voice and facial expressions that help us empathize. Anytime you're dealing with an important emotional issue, do not email or text. At some point, meet face to face, or at least talk it out on the phone. An emoji is not going to cut it. I like that. That was good. It was like a contemporary.
Physical, especially in this society, in the new year.
Because if you're fighting with somebody over the text, you just go back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And you take screenshots, send it to your friends. Be like, say, look at what this person's telling me.
Yeah. Texting is dangerous. You gotta watch out here. So write something and think about it, right?
Because it's documented, right?
Yeah, because if you're upset, again, like I said, deal with your emotions first and people second, right? And you want to write your message as if everybody's going to read it, not that it's like this private dagger that you're stabbing somebody in the ribs with. You don't take that perspective, right? So there's some self-awareness and self-control, emotional intelligence. They're directly related to that. Okay, we're almost done here. Whoa! What if you can't get a resolution through empathetic listening? Resolving the conflict isn't actually the goal of empathetic listening. Understanding is. So, for example, when he was 14, him and his family, when he was a kid, and his dad, Stephen Covey, who wrote this book, they went to a movie. He was upset. He was one of 9 kids. He hated being carted around like he was another number. It was dehumanizing for him. So to get a sense of identity, he said mean things to hurt everybody. His dad, Stephen Covey, instead of getting mad, asked him what was wrong. And then Sean Covey, his kid, said, you don't care about anybody. I'm not like everyone else. You can't treat me like that. 304, he listened, reflected back, and sought to understand. He didn't agree. He just understood. I never came around, but he never got mad at me either. He just let my anger dissipate, which technically didn't resolve anything, but because of his acknowledgement, I didn't feel the need to rebel anymore. In retrospect, it was smart of him. My father used to say, let negative energy fly out open windows. Don't take it on. Sometimes your kid's spouse or coworkers may make a negative or irresponsible comments. This is actually one of the things I like the most about what this guy said. Everything else is kind of just whatever. Instead of taking it on and trying to resolve it, ignore it like it wasn't even uttered. Like it wasn't even uttered. It's like giving people a free pass for something they said in the heat of the moment. Let it fly out an open window instead of closing the window and letting it bounce around the room. You'll both get hurt. So that's nice. Another way of saying it is choose your battles. And being compassionate. When people are upset, and again, I deal with people with mental illness, and sometimes I live with them, and people say shit. And so you need to learn when to say something. In the moment might not be the best time, but you can say, hey, yesterday I heard you say this, and then you can talk about it again, right? Habits 4 through 6 seem to overlap. What's the difference? Habits 4, 5, and 6 are different but work together. He's taught students the mnemonic root, and fruit. Habit 4, think win, is the foundation or the root of effective relationships. The root, like a route to get from A to B, for getting there is to practice habit 5. Seek first to understand, then be understood. And the fruit of your produce by practicing habits 4 and 5 is synergy, which is habit 6, that we cooperate together and we have an emergent product or output that no person could do on their own, which is what the philosophy society at an emergent level would have for mental health and political situations. When I try empathetic listening, the other person feels like I'm using a technique. People will sense immediately if empathetic listening isn't genuine. You need to have good intent, not just the skill. When facing a relationship conflict, most people working on public victory, for example, my spouse and I can't get along, we need to do habit 5. Yes, that might be true, but you may not be ready for it yet. Many relationship challenges can only be solved by winning the private victory first. So we talked about this. Go back to habit 1 and use your awareness, conscience, imagination, and independent will to get clear on your motives. You're communicating. It's hard to be empathetic, right? Why are you doing it? You know, what's going on inside you? Use habit 2 to envision what you want to do differently, right? And so when you think about a goal and then I visualize how I'm going to get there, you know, not through somebody like you're holding them down. You're like, just tell me the truth. It's like, you want them to like relax and feel like, this is what happened, man. And you're like, okay, you know? And then make it happen through habit 3. Seeking first to understand another person makes you vulnerable because you may learn some things that are threatening you. To generally practice habit 5, you may need the emotional security that comes from first winning the private victory, which makes sense. Make sure you're a sound mind so you're not vulnerable to being manipulated. Okay, so that is habit 5, right? What's habit 5? Oh, you tell me, what's habit 5?
Understand before being understood.
Seek first to understand.
Yes,
Then be understood.
very good. That's good. That's a pass.
Right.
It's a pass.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, as you were reading Covey, right at the end there, you said, I like what he's saying here, but everything else was kind of meh. So I wanted to get like why
Yeah. Because it wasn't conceptually, there was nothing. He's kind of just rambling on about stuff. Like, I think part of what's going on here, like Sean Covey, is in the shadow of his father, right? Like he works for his dad's company.
Wait, what?
Stephen Covey,
Yeah.
right? And then the person that wrote this in this edition of the book, his son, Sean Covey, wrote all of this stuff.
Oh, so you're saying that what Sean said in that section there.
It wasn't really adding anything. When you look at the arguments in the book, there was no real new premise.
Got it. Okay.
But that section,
I wasn't even aware that he wrote that section.
those sections were written by him.
Sean. Okay.
It's not in that edition. That's why you guys have to get this one, but that's better than nothing.
Okay,
So,
all right.
that part where he's like, his dad never said that before. Everything else, he's just saying his dad's stuff in a different way.
Mhm.
But when he's like, just let some things go.
Mhm.
That's not part of seek first to understand that be understood. It actually has nothing to do with that.
Mhm.
It's a completely different thing.
I see. Okay.
And so that's why I said this is the only real meaningful thing out of this last part.
Mm.
We can talk about other things, but that is distinct. That's not, you don't see that anywhere else in the book.
Yeah.
He talks about influencing people, and I think I read another book that's similar to that. How to Win President.
Yeah, Dale Carnegie.
Have
Okay.
you read that one?
I have.
Great book.
That's a great book. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. There's a
Um,
lot of concepts in that book too that might be similar.
yeah, it would apply to this chapter for sure.
Okay.
It was a few years ago. I read it. It's not next on the list, but we could find a place for it maybe.
Yeah, because I love that book.
I would rather go through this content first,
Okay.
though. Social psychology, but I have to prepare for it, or else I'm just gonna be like flipping through.
It's government propaganda.
Government, bro. That's a fucking punk rock song right there.
Do we have to buy that book too? Social psychology.
Not yet. This one, yes, I have one here for sale for you if you want to take one with you right now.
How much is it?
$300.
That one has a damaged cover, so it's less.
Okay.
I'll
see. I'll get one.
Yeah, $20 for that one
Okay.
because it's damaged. So I got it a little bit cheaper.
Okay.
And then this one is not damaged, so it's like the same. Okay, so we have this image here. So we went through, okay, the independence section. Oh, sorry, dependence to independence. So habits 1, 2, 3, private victory. Now we're from independence to interdependence. So we did think, win, win, and then seek first, understand, then be understood. And now we're going to do synergize, which is basically like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When we cooperate with all the previous 5 habits, we're now all in a position to communicate, to understand each other, and to know what our goals are. And so it's supposed to be a better way of group cooperation. And so, yeah, so next week, we're going to go through, I think we're going to go through this chapter.
Chapter 6 and again.
Yeah, I would like to do a movie soon, just because. But I want to get through some of this book. So I think next week, and I also want to do some of this stuff. So I think we're going to do this. I'd like to get through like one or I like just kind of like we're almost done this book. I just want to finish it,
Mm.
you know.
Mhm.
But I also want to do movies. So maybe I'll get some stuff ready.
Like
We'll get
movies,
through
like
this.
We watch movies or
Yeah, so there's different segments of the philosophy study. So the philosophy study is just like a group, and then there is the philosophy academy, which are courses, and this is one of the courses that I'm teaching, and there's videos online. The evaluation stuff is not done yet, but whatever, we'll get there when we need it. And then there's critical films, which is specific movies that we watch, and then we go through the dialogue and discuss it. And then there's other things too, like with the university, like if I have professors talk or other kinds of events we can do workshops for meditation and stuff like that, like these kinds of things, or specific emotional intelligence, like workshops. But it would be different. It'd be more like hands-on. I don't know if I would be videotaping it necessarily, like, because I want people to be able to talk about personal things. They may not feel comfortable if I'm publishing that on YouTube.
This chapter,
Okay.
Finally.
Sure.
do you think it's based on pathos and logos, two Greek gods?
Okay.
If you don't know about Greek philosophy, Greek Romance philosophy, how could you understand this chapter or write this chapter?
Well, he knew it. He studied
I know, it's
Yeah.
totally it's
Mhm.
Yeah,
based.
for sure.
This is called the inspiration. They took the the classical philosophy and translate into this language. But it's totally based in voice knew about the new ideas, because when he wrote, it was pathos and logos inside.
That's why it's a good book. That's why I teach it. Right? Because it's bringing back some of the past stuff, and we're talking about contemporary things. But this stuff would still apply back then. It's just that it was written now. You know?
Sure.
Okay. I think that's good for the video line. I'm going to turn this off. So I'll see you guys next week. We're going to do synergize.